What's up guys, Mizzo Frizzo here, and as many of you are already aware, I am recording a tutorial series on how to make a multiplayer first-person shooter in Unreal Engine 5. This is not a new installment in the series, but rather a re-recording of part 1 because Unreal Engine 5.4 has dropped recently, and it brings with it a few small changes that make following along to part 1 of this series a bit tricky. So I'm just re-recording part 1 to address some of those small changes for anyone that's going to be following along with this series using Unreal Engine 5.4. Now, just before we get started, guys, if you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe. And if you are so inclined, please do consider making a small donation to the channel via the YouTube Super Thanks function. It really goes a long way to keeping me going. So without further ado, guys, let's jump in. Alrighty guys, the first thing I'm going to do is create a new project using the first person template. We're going to leave it on Blueprint. We're not going to be doing any C++ in this project. We don't need starter content. Just rename your project, whatever you want, and hit create. Now, fair warning guys, I have noticed that there are some stability issues with 5.4, but I'm recording this tutorial anyway for anyone who, is just steadfast on using 5.4 as early as possible. Why not? I'm sure there'll be an update soon that will, fix some of the bugs. But with that being said, let's jump in. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the third-person content pack to this project. So I'm going to click add down here and add feature content or pack, and I'm going to add this third-person content pack to the project. So if I hit add to project now, you'll see that it's created a couple of new folders down here, third person and characters. So that's how you know it's been added. So I can now close this. And the other thing I'm going to do is find an animation asset pack from the Unreal Marketplace. So head over to the Unreal Marketplace, and this is the asset pack you want to add to your project. It's called the Animation Starter Pack. It's by Epic Games themselves. You can hit add to project. And if you don't see your project here, you can just click show all projects, select your project, and then down here, select the most recent compatible version, which is probably going to be 5.2, and click add to project. You'll know this one has been added because it will add this folder Anim Starter Pack right here. So you can see we've got a bunch of animation assets and a couple of other assets here for the UE4 mannequin. So we need to first retarget these for our UE5 mannequin. So I'm just going to create a new folder in here. I'm going to call it UE5. And then I am going to filter for animation sequence. If you don't have this filter here, you can click right here and find animation and animation sequence. So you're going to filter for animation sequence, and then you can press Control A to select all of these, and you can right click. And this is one of the changes with 5.4. We used to be able to duplicate and retarget animation assets, but now you see if you right click, you've just got this option, retarget animations. So this does make things a lot easier. You can use a retargeter asset as we would with an older version by just unchecking this box here, and then you could select this RTG UE4 many to UE5 many. This is the retargeter that comes inside the third-person content pack, but let's just leave this checked for now, and we are just going to select a new target skeletal mesh here, and that's going to be SKM many. And then we can just press Control A right here to select all of these animation assets right here and click Export Animations. And then we can find our UE5 folder that we created, and let's just add a prefix to these duplicate assets. Let's put UE5 underscore. So all of these new assets will be renamed with a prefix UE5 underscore at the beginning, and hit Export. We can just leave this as default and hit export, and this should take you to the new folder with all of these retargeted assets. So today we're going to be using, where is it? UE5 idle rifle iron sights. We're going to be using this animation here for when we pick up the rifle. So we can just leave that as is for now, but just before we move ahead, one thing I want to do before we forget is go into the third person folder here and the input folder here and just delete this input folder. It's because these input mapping contexts that are inside this folder have the exact same name as they do in the first person folder, and we want to eliminate any confusion here. So we're just going to delete that input folder. This will also create some errors in the BP third person character. So we can open this up, and if we hit compile, you'll see we've got these errors here. Let's just delete all these nodes right here. Hit compile and save and close that. We'll keep this blueprint in case we want to use it for an enemy AI or something like that later on. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is look at attaching the weapon to our third person mesh. Actually, no, let's set up a third person mesh first. So if I hit play now, what I'm going to do is change the number of players here to 2 and change this to play as listen server. And I am also going to select new editor window for the pie here. So we've got 2 windows. And what you'll notice is that if I run over in front of the other player here, you can't actually see anything. There's nothing to see. If I pick up the gun, it just kind of floats around in a weird spot. This is another thing I've noticed that's different with 5.4. It has a very, very strange position indeed. I don't know why that's floating around like that. It should just be static, sort of in the middle somewhere, just floating around. But we're going to fix all this in a moment. So the first thing we need to do is set up a third person mesh for other characters to see. So let's find our first person folder and blueprints and open BP first person character and head over to the viewport. And actually, the first thing I'm going to do is grab the camera here and change the first argument here on location to 0. I'm going to center the camera right in the center of the capsule component like so. Let's use this mesh component right here that has already been created for us. I don't know why this is here, but let's use it. So select the mesh right here, and we're going to change the skeletal mesh asset to SKM many, like so. We can change the third argument on the rotation here to -90 to align him properly, and the first argument on location here to 0. So he's centered, like so. We can also choose the animation blueprint right here under anim class, select ABP many, and then we can search for owner and check owner no see. So only other players will see this mesh right here. So if we hit compile and save and play now, you'll notice that if I run out here, there is actually a third person mesh for this other character to see. So these guys can both see each other now. This mesh is only visible to other players. That's why we checked that owner no see. But you'll see if we pick up the weapon here, it's still floating around in a very strange position. It's not even locked to his hand. I don't really know what it's attaching to there. It could just be that the arms are not playing the animation. The arms are playing like the normal running animation, the unarmed one. That could be it. But we're going to make this weapon attach properly. But let's first just change his pose when he has the rifle. So one of the changes with 5.4 that I really don't think makes any sense at all is in the variables here of the first person character, there is no HasRifle boolean. So normally what I would tell you to do, if we open up the weapon component, which is in first person blueprints, BP weapon component right here, this is the weapon component that's added to the character when we pick up the rifle. So we're picking up the rifle, this is created, and on begin play, it's attaching to the grip point, and then it's adding the input mapping context to the character, and then it is casting to the animation blueprint and setting HasRifle within the animation blueprint. So just a bit of a sidebar here. If you were following along with the other version, the initial version of part 1, and you were having trouble finding this HasRifle, so we were going into the animation blueprint ABP many, and we were getting HasRifle from the first person character, but it just wouldn't appear. So you would be like, okay, you're casting to the first person character, and off the character reference, you were unable to find this boolean HasRifle. So if you go into first person character, yes, there's no HasRifle here. So what's the deal? Where is that? Well, it's set in the weapon component when it's created. So you could head over to the weapon component and see what's going on here. And what's going on here is actually it's setting it in the animation blueprint instead. So what we're going to do is create a HasRifle in the BP first person character. Now we're going to be adding our own weapons to this project eventually, so this doesn't matter too much, but I do just want to have this set up so that we know what's going on here, and so that it looks nice with the initial, first person template gun that we're picking up and all that. So I'm creating a boolean here in the first person character, and I'm making sure that this HasRifle boolean's default value is set to false over here. And then in the weapon component, what I want to do before this stuff, because we've casted to the controller here, it does some funky stuff or it doesn't work on all clients, so you need to do it before this code right here. So I'm just going to grab this first person character reference right here, and I'm going to set HasRifle to true. And now when we cast to our character from the animation blueprint, we will have this boolean to retrieve for the animation blueprint. So let's do that right now. If I select this third person mesh and I browse to the anim class right here, browse to the ABP many, you might be using ABP Quinn. If you're using ABP Quinn or Quinn's mesh, it doesn't matter. You still need to make all of the changes in ABP many, because ABP Quinn is a child of ABP many. If you open up ABP Quinn, that's what it will tell you. So open up ABP many, make all of your changes in here. The first change I'm going to make is this cast to character. This is not a direct cast to our first person character, so we won't be able to, for example, if I drag off this character reference, I won't be able to get HasRifle from there. I won't be able to get any of the new variables that we create from here. So we need to change this to a direct cast. So we'll delete this node, and off of get owning actor here, we're going to cast to first person character, cast to BP first person character, plug these in here, and also select this set variable node and change the variable type to an object reference to our first person character. So BP first person character, object reference. Click change variable type. It will do some things and stuff. And now if I drag off of this character, I should be able to get HasRifle like so. I'm just going to tidy this graph up really quick by selecting this comment right here. I'm going to grab the first few words of the comment here, set velocity and ground speed, and Control C those. And then I'm going to highlight this and right click, collapse nodes, and then Control V to paste in set velocity and ground speed. And now we've collapsed all of those nodes into its own little mini function here. Whoops. Back out to the event graph and do the same with these ones. Select this comment, grab set should move, Control C, select all of this, right click, collapse nodes, paste that in, set should move, and this is looking much tidier already. Set is falling, Control C, collapse nodes, Control V, set is falling. Nice. Okay. Now let's grab our character reference from over here, Control click and drag out our character reference, and then I'm going to get HasRifle, promote this to a variable, plug this in to add an execution pin here and plug it in, and then I can highlight these and right click, collapse nodes, and call this set HasRifle. Whoops. Nice. Now we have access to our HasRifle in our animation blueprint. Let's head over to the anim graph now, And the first thing I'm going to do is just delete this control rig for the foot IK. If we mess with the animations, it completely messes up the foot IK anyway, so I'm just going to delete that. We're not going to be doing foot IK in this tutorial. It is a bit more advanced. I'm going to hold Alt and click this pin to unconnect that pin right there. And then off of main states right here, I'm going to find a layered blend per bone. Layered blend per bone. And this default slot for our animation montages is going to plug into our blend pose right here. This can plug into the output pose. I'm going to select the layered blend per bone node, and then right here under blend mode, layer setup, we can drop this down, drop down this index and add a branch filter by clicking this add element icon. Drop down the index on that branch filter, change the bone name to spine_01, and make sure that you check mesh space rotation blend and mesh space scale blend. And now if I hit compile, you'll see he'll do an A pose on his upper body like so. And that's because we're blending from the first spine bone up, and we've got nothing to blend there, so he's just doing an A pose. So we are going to fix that right now. What we can do is we can right click up here and add a new state machine, and let's call it upper body anims. I'm going to Control C that name, and then I'm going to drag off of here and find new save cached pose, and then I'm also going to paste in upper body anims on that cached pose, and then down here I can find that cached pose upper body anims, and I can plug it in here. And I'm going to go into my upper body anims, and off of entry I'm going to add a state, and I'm just going to call it base. And within base I am going to find a blend poses by bool. And I'm going to grab my HasRifle, put it into the active value right here, and now it's going to blend between these two poses based on whether this boolean is true or false. So obviously if it's true, we want it to play some kind of armed animation, and if it's false, what we can do is we can just find main states. Actually, we need to cache main states before we can use it here. So let's go back out to the anim graph, and this main states right here, let's disconnect that. Let's Control C the name over here. Let's create a new save cached pose, paste in the name main states, and then find main states down here, use cached pose main states, plug that in right here, and now we can use this main states wherever we like. So back in upper body anims and base, we can now find that cached pose main states, and that's going to be our false pose. The true pose is going to be our idle rifle iron sights, but we are going to need to make some changes to that. Idle rifle iron sights right here, plug that in, and make sure you check loop animation with idle rifle iron sights selected. Check loop animation. Now if I hit compile, it's going to be normal right here, but if I select this HasRifle and change the default value to true, you'll see that he goes into the idle rifle iron sights pose in the upper body right here. We can change that back to false. It's just to check that that's working. Let's make some changes to this animation and also where the gun attaches to on this third person mesh that we've created. So let's first find the skeleton for this third person mesh, which is going to be in characters, mannequins, meshes, and SK mannequin right here. So we can open up SK mannequin, and now if you're using Quinn, this is fine. I'm using many, so I'm going to change the preview mesh to SKM many simple, and then I'm going to click down here, preview mesh set temporarily, apply to asset. So this means that every time we open this asset, it will now have this mesh. We can change the preview animation to our idle rifle iron sights. Whoops. Idle rifle iron sights. Whoops, that's not the right one. Where is it? Idle rifle iron sights. There we go. I'm going to hit pause on this one and take it back to the first frame. And I'm going to find the right hand. I'm going to right click on it and add a socket. I'm just going to leave it called hand R socket. I'm going to right click on that socket and add a preview asset, find our FP gun and add that in. And then I'm going to adjust this socket location and rotation so that it's more or less in the right place. I might turn off rotation snapping and grid snapping. And I'm really only going to worry about the position of the right hand for this one. So get it more or less in the right place. That is about right. With minimal clipping through the hand here, I might rotate this forward a little bit. And that's fine like that. I'm not going to worry about anything else, just the position of the right hand on the grip right here, because this is just the socket location. You can see that is a little bit out of whack there. There's going to be some clipping through the fingers here because it's not, it's not set up to... Actually, let's make this socket a little bit smaller. So let's change the relative scale. Let's try 0.9, 0.9, 0.9. Let's try 0.8, 0.8, 0.8. That's looking a bit more reasonable. I mean, I know it's like kind of like a toy gun, like a toy sci-fi kind of gun, but that just looks a little bit more reasonable. More or less into the right position with regards to the right hand. Very good. We can save and we can close that. And then we want to open idle rifle iron sights. You can do so just by double clicking on this node. It will open up the animation asset. Then I can hit pause, take it back to the first frame. And now we're going to play with this pose a little bit so that, it's just a better looking pose. So let's start with the alignment of the right hand and the gun relative to the ground. So we can click on skeleton tree over here. We can find the right hand and I'm going to change this to global space up here. Change this to global space. And now I can make this gun a little bit more level like so. And pointing straight ahead like so. Doesn't have to be perfect. And just bring it down a bit so that the gun is level with this plane that he's standing on as a reference. That looks pretty good. That's pretty straight. Let's also play with the left hand here. So I can find the upper arm left and I can bring this in a bit and up a bit. And you'll notice that the hand is also in quite an odd position here. So before I do anything else, I might just want to straighten that up a bit like so. That already looks a lot nicer. Grab the upper arm, bring it in. If I want his hand to sit further forward on the weapon, what I can do is extend the lower arm a little bit and then go back to the upper arm and bring it back in. I mean, it hasn't really done much for us. You might need to extend it this way as well. And that's done a bit more to pull it forward a little bit. It doesn't matter too much. You can even go in and fiddle with the hands a little bit. So I might find the right hand and the right index. Oh, sorry, left hand. My mistake. So the left hand, left index. And for fingers, I prefer to change this to object space so that we don't sort of rotate the fingers off their own axes. I'm just going to extend the fingers a little bit so they're not clipping so much through the gun. Like so. It doesn't matter too much, obviously. We are going to end up adding our own animations and our own weapons to this project, but you know, this takes 1 minute and makes things look a lot cleaner. That'll do just like that. It's kind of finessing the weapon a little bit. That looks nice. Minimal clipping. Very good. Now, if you just wanted to change a couple of things, you could just add a keyframe for the things that you've changed. For example, if you just moved the upper arm, you just move this a little bit, you could then just add a keyframe for that upper arm. But since we've made quite a few changes here, what I'm going to do is click in the skeleton tree, press Ctrl A to select everything, and just add a keyframe for everything, like so. So now if I hit play, his hand will move around. Obviously, it's moving around quite a bit. It's not ideal. You know, you could lock his left hand to the gun with left hand IK, which we will be doing in a much later session. But the point now is just to get this sort of pose where he's looking sort of straight ahead, like so. So this will do for now. We can save and we can close this. And now what we need to do, actually before we close that, let's open up that skeleton again. Before we close this, I just want to copy the name of this right hand socket. So I'm going to either single click on it or press F2 to rename, and then Control C to copy the name of that socket, because we want this weapon to attach to that socket on every other player's instance of our character, if that makes any sense. So this attaches to the grip point on our first person arms, but if it's a player on someone else's instance, we want it to attach to the third person mesh instead. So what I'm going to do is drag off of this first person character reference. We're in the BP weapon component here, by the way, and I'm going to find is locally controlled. And then I'm going to use that as a condition on a branch. And if it is locally controlled, we can go ahead and just attach component to component like so. I am also going to press Ctrl D and duplicate this attach node and plug false into this one down here. And off of first person character here, we can get mesh. Now, this is called mesh because we just grabbed this mesh here and changed it, but for the purpose of sort of continuity in future sessions, I am going to rename this to, we may not be able to rename it. This is inherited. Yeah, this is inherited, so we won't be able to rename that. But I've called it TP mesh for third person mesh in the other tutorials. We'll just have to leave it called mesh, that's fine. Drag off a first person character here and get mesh, and that's going to be our parent. And then right here in the socket name, we can paste, because I duplicated this node. Sorry guys. So I am going to need to go back to this skeleton, copy this socket name again, and then paste in the socket name. You want to make sure that this socket name is exactly correct, spelt exactly correctly here. So copy pasting is a kind of foolproof way of doing it. And then this execution pin will just plug back in up here. So if it is locally controlled, we'll attach to the first person arms. And if it isn't locally controlled, meaning it's another player in our instance, it will attach to the third person mesh. And now that should all be working correctly. If we hit play and I run over here, we've got the normal character and he's got the full main states animation set on his upper body. And if I pick up a weapon, he's changed to the idle rifle iron sights on the upper body. But as you can see here, when I jump and move around, he's still got the animations from the normal animations on the lower body. Nice. So the only other thing we need to do today is add a vertical aim offset, a kind of procedural vertical aim offset, so this character can look up and down. And how we're going to do that is in ABP Mani. We're going to go to the event graph here, and I'm going to add an execution pin, grab the character reference right here, and get base aim, get base aim rotation. I'm going to right click here and split the struct pin, and then the Y right here, the first thing I'm going to do is do 360 minus the Y. I am also going to multiply it by -1, so I'm going to negate it. That seems to be, there we go. And then I'm also going to check if it's greater than 180 degrees. I'm going to use this to select float, plug this one in here, plug this one in here. And all this is doing is when we look up and down, this pitch value of how much we're looking up and down is different if we're looking up past horizontal than if we're looking down past horizontal. So this is just checking if it's greater than 180, it will select this one. 360 minus this number will give us an actual angle to rotate on. So it doesn't matter too much, but just to explain a little bit of what's going on here. You know, you can print this base aim rotation if you go to event tick and put it on a print string and print this Y from the base aim rotation. You'll see what I mean with the figure that it pumps out is not sort of it doesn't fall in line with the angle that you're looking, so you need to do some calculations here. The next thing we're going to do is divide this by the number of spine bones that we're going to be rotating, which is 5. So you'll see in a moment why we divide this by 5. We can then find a make rotator and just leave it plugged into the role there, X. And then this make rotator we can promote to a variable, call it pitch rotation, something like that. Plug it into the last execution pin right here. And then I'm going to select all of this and right click collapse nodes and just call it something like calculate pitch. Nice. Now if we go to the anim graph, I'm going to grab these nodes right here, drag them way out to the left. I'm going to right click here and search mod and find transform modify bone. I'm going to select this transform modify bone, and right here under translation and pin, I'm going to uncheck expose as pin. I'm going to keep rotation exposed as a pin, but I'm going to change the rotation mode to add to existing. And then scale, I'm going to unexpose that as a pin. Alpha, I'm going to unexpose that as a pin. So we've just got this one pin called rotation, and the rotation mode is set to add to existing. Now that we've done that, we can duplicate this 4 times so that we've got 5 of them. I'm going to plug them all in to one another. And I'm going to grab my pitch rotation, plug that into the rotation pins on all of these, like so. And the last thing we need to do here is select a bone to modify. So I'm going to select the first node here, and up here I'm going to find bone to modify and change it to spine 1. The second one I'm going to change to spine 2. Third one to spine 3. Spine 4. and spine 5. I'm going to hit compile and save. And if I hit play now, my character should be looking up and down like so. Now I know it doesn't look super great because he's just sort of bending at the spine, so it doesn't look super realistic. Don't worry. In part 2, we changed that to make it much more realistic, look much, much nicer. So don't worry about that. The main thing that we wanted to do today is just set up this third-person mesh so that other players can see us, and we're picking up a weapon, we're attaching it to the relevant socket if it's not a locally controlled player, and we're making our character able to look up and down. So this gives us a pretty good base which we're going to add to in future sessions. Guys, if this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.